Hello and welcome to It's No Secret. I'm Kat.
And I'm Christine.
And today on the show we are answering the question of, should I use my KiwiSaver to buy a first home? I think lots of people probably hear that question and they're like, yeah, duh, why are we even talking about this? Because this is what every New Zealander does. And hey, I'm not here to argue with you, although I sort of am.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, but I think that it is worthwhile certainly us discussing, because as some of our hardcore listeners will know, in Australia most people do not have the option to use their version of KiwiSaver, their superannuation, for a first home. Also not the same in lots of other countries like the UK. And putting Christine in the spotlight, I know that she has recently decided to focus her KiwiSaver efforts on a slightly different goal than the first home. So I'm going to throw to you first and say, hey, because I feel like, you know, a year ago on the show we were talking about what you would be doing in terms of first home purchases and KiwiSaver, and now you've done a total 180. So where are you at?
What's new?
Yeah.
Well, okay, first question is, what else can you focus your KiwiSaver on?
Yep.
So the dead giveaway is that there's only two goals that you can use it for, so first home buying and retirement. So yes, I'm who knows, it might change in 6 months, we'll see.
Yeah.
But currently I'm at the point where I don't really want to forego the compounding that I would if I was to take out the money for my first home,
Absolutely.
in place of what that can give me at retirement. And
Yep.
I think also, knowing myself, retirement can often feel very out of reach, but also something that we easily forget to kind of save for, or perhaps don't prioritize in place of like short-term travel or
Yep.
even just enough to actually have a comfortable retirement. So yeah, I am quite focused on not taking it out to buy a first home. But that said, what that creates is like you have to find that money somewhere else. So what else am I going to do?
That's on the assumption that you still want to buy a first home, and I'm assuming
that's
that
true.
you do. But the reason I bring that up is I was recently speaking to a group of young lawyers, and we were talking exactly about this topic because it's no secret that people are challenged when it comes to first home purchases in New Zealand. Just some brand placement there. And we put the question to the audience of who even actually wants to still buy their first home. Like, what is that even, I guess, people's primary goal? And interestingly enough, only about 50% of the audience actually put their hand up that was the main thing that they're currently working towards. A lot of other people, I guess, had reconciled themselves with the fact that they have lots of other different financial goals that they can equally work towards and are important, i.e. retirement, and they were happy to prioritise that instead. So I guess, you know, if you are focusing on retirement and you're not using your KiwiSaver for your first home, to your point, it's like, what else do you do? But maybe we'll start with the positives. Maybe we'll start with the positives. So let's play through the scenario of, you know, Christine is not going to use her KiwiSaver at this stage for her first home. What is going to end up happening for her? And as you said, you know, you're really going to maximise your benefit of compounding. So do you want to talk us through a little bit about that?
Sure, I can do my best.
Yeah.
So in theory, I guess the more money you have as a base or a principal, the faster it's going to compound over time. So if you are unaware of what compounding is, it is essentially your money making money on the money that it's made.
Correct.
Sounds.
And to do that, you need a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, growth is exponential, right? And not linear, as I learned last year from Kat.
Not linear.
And so for me, if I have roughly about 35,000 in my KiwiSaver right now. If I was to withdraw that alongside other savings I had for a house, then that means I'm starting from zero to get then again to, I don't know, whatever I'll need at retirement.
Which, if you think of an exponential graph, right, is like this. And if you're already here and you're much close to like hitting the nice little curve bit on the exponential graph, and then you take that money out and you go back to here, but you go back to here when you're, let's say, for example, in your early 30s versus when you were 18 when you signed up for KiwiSaver, you've lost 18 years worth of growth. And you're not going to get that back on the other side, right? Like, you're not, I don't think, going to delay your retirement until you're like 83.
No. I plan on using my money while I'm able-bodied.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we talk about in terms of like cutting off your compounding at the knees. It's because Christine's already in her situation had so many years growing that base that she's getting closer to it being more and more exponential. But should she take that money out and be starting again from scratch, it's going to be a lot harder to get there.
Yeah.
She doesn't have the same amount of time.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we know that from looking at the stats, shout out to Tim in our team who's done some great socials on this with Colonel, is, you can put in double the amount of money after the fact, but it actually doesn't catch you up any more than the time does, if that makes sense. So, if you were doing 3% and then you upped to 6% when you re-entered KiwiSaver after buying your first home, you're not necessarily going to get any more money than if you would having started at 18 on a lower base.
Yeah, cool. So if I was listening to the podcast, which hopefully, you are, and I was sitting there thinking, well, can't I achieve that same growth through property or another type of asset or,
Excellent question, because I know exactly what people would say. They'll be like, well, why don't I just take my KiwiSaver out, buy a home, I'll grow my first home, and then I've still been growing my wealth. For anyone that has heard me speak before, they'll know that my life motto is that your house is not an investment asset. And I think exactly what you just said, Christine,
not a lifestyle asset.
No, is not an investment asset. It is a lifestyle asset. It's not an investment asset.
Yes.
But that's that exact mindset, right? Like you're taking out an investment asset, which is your KiwiSaver, and putting that money into what is a lifestyle asset. And the reason that I talk about that is because you can't get to 65 and then retire and sell your bathroom to fund your next year's worth of living expenses. And people sometimes just don't appreciate exactly how that scenario is going to play out. And I understand it's probably because thinking about you at 65 when you're 25 is really fucking boring. But
it's a long time away.
Exactly. But that's the reality. And so what would, if all of your wealth or the predominant part of your wealth was in your home, then what happens at 65? You have to sell that home. And that for a lot of people comes with emotion, like challenges. People get tied up with things like very beautiful goals around intergenerational wealth or helping their family members and all that kind of stuff, and you start to lose those opportunities if all of your assets is really focused in your house. So that's certainly a challenge. So that's why I guess I would say that, yes, there is the argument that, sure, you're going to have some growth in property in a similar way that you might have growth in your KiwiSaver, but we can also talk about the numbers on that. But it's not in an investment property. It's in a property that you're living in, and that poses different challenges. Yeah,
definitely. I was just sitting here thinking about the classic scenario of, should I buy a batch or should I have cash to go on
holidays.
Yeah, and not a million, 5 different batches around New Zealand, and then you get to try a new place and do different things. In theory, it's the exact same thing but you just don't have, I guess there's a comfort that can come from having your own home and DIYing it and blah, blah, blah. You make memories there, but it's a different type of memory that you make in a
and there's
different
also
way.
a lot of psychological security. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think this is something that I've been talking with my parents a lot about. Of they are those people that, yes, they do have retirement savings outside of their home, but the reality is, a lot of, I think, our parents or older generations, the vast majority of their wealth is in their home. So they're going to have to sell the family home and then downsize and hopefully get some money out of that and then do something with that. Now, we've been talking about what that downsizing situation looks like, and they have this dream that they would like to have somewhere to spend time in New Zealand so they can come and, spend quite a few months here with our family. And that's really, really nice. But getting them comfortable with the idea of just committing to spending money for 4 months like an Airbnb is really hard, because there's a lot of psychological discomfort with spending for a lot of people, right? And even though the batch thing is somewhat it's a lot of tied up money for people. They're like, yeah, but it's an asset that's going to grow. It's the positive. It's not me spending $35,000 a year on various different holiday locations and other stuff. But when you look at it, $35,000 like expense scenario might actually be more cost effective than you holding this asset that has other costs associated with it that, again, you can't necessarily easily take money out of. But it's that whole thing. It's like the mindset thing. There's so much more to it than the numbers. If we were just driven by the numbers, I feel like no one would own a house in the first instance, and then I don't really know what happens after that. But hey.
I love that.
So yes, so I guess this will be the question on everyone's minds is, Christine, if you're not going to use your KiwiSaver to buy a house, how are you even going to buy a house? So tell me.
Tell me
more.
Oh God, how do I even answer that question?
I know, sorry.
That's all right. So for me, wait, can you repeat the question?
She's in such a frazzle. She just doesn't know how to do this. She's like, I can't buy a house. What's happening? I regret everything. We're not going to talk about it anymore.
Am I going to change my mind in a week?
So the question was, if you are not going to use a KiwiSaver as towards a deposit for your first home, how do you feel like you're actually going to be able to buy a first home?
Yeah, so as I said before, in terms of like splitting, I guess the amount per paycheck that I invest, half of that I want to put towards retirement and through KiwiSaver, and then the other half I intend on investing through, index funds such as like with Kernel or
but in a personal account.
Yes, yeah. So one that isn't locked, and then I can invest towards my goal of buying a home at some point. Outside of that, you can do things like investing in private equity, or you can start a business. I guess I kind of, at some point in my life, would like to start a business, and there is a lot of risk, obviously, in that, but there's also a lot of potential gain. So there are other avenues that you can get to home ownership or to retirement if you also wanted to flip this conversation on the other side. But I guess I also kind of want to build a house, not buy one. So there's a lot of like in there.
Okay. So what I'm taking from your explanation is you have lots of good goals that you're working towards, and I guess making like good financial decisions for, and hopefully at some point that will then eventuate in home ownership. But exactly how that looks, you're not too stressed about at this stage potentially, and you're just like, I would like to ignore KiwiSaver because that needs to be for my retirement, because there are these other things that I might want to do, and at least if I've left my KiwiSaver there, my retirement is somewhat taken care of without having to think about it too much.
Exactly. And I think a key point is that I'm not stressed to own a home by 30 or by XYZ point. I'm not putting pressure on that. And so as long as I guess at some point in my life, maybe own a home or an apartment or whatever, maybe I own a batch, and that's kind of the thing that is my property ownership. Instead, I'll get there at some point.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, on that, like, just throwing out some scenarios. We have talked before that the average age of first home ownership in New Zealand is 36, which is a lot higher than people expect. I know in our scenario, Luke would have been probably 33 when we bought our first home. We have friends that live in our street who are in their 50s who have never owned a home. They then opted to just be like, you know what, we're just going to buy a holiday house because we're kind of close to retirement anyway, and we don't really want to retire in Auckland. So they just skipped out on the whole first home thing and just kind of bought, something further north. I have also had a friend who, again, was like, we're not going to be able to buy in Auckland, but maybe we would like to commit to renting here and have something smaller in the country that we could enjoy over summer and stuff. And that's what they ended up doing. So their first home was actually like a country property that just has like an older house on it that they live in, obviously on weekends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, there's no, I guess, one right scenario to go down or path.
Yeah. And, maybe there is compromise around the size of the house when you buy it, or it is the location, right? I was just saying before that we also have friends who bought an apartment, or family members that bought an apartment in the city, and then they bought land out of the city and they put a caravan on that land. So and then they get that lifestyle element while still being able to save on commuting or whatever. You just rework it to whatever suits you, rather than like giving into societal pressures of buying a house for 430.
Exactly. Now, I do want to bring up the whole thing of, it's nice to have retirement taken care of in some aspects when you don't want to think about that when you're in your 20s. And at risk of sounding like a boomer, I am going to say that because Luke and I didn't have the option of using our superannuation in Australia, so, I've lived there for most of my working life. Luke worked there for 11 years. We both had a reasonable amount in our Australian super accounts when we moved to New Zealand, and we've left that money there. So the last time that we talked deeply on the show about KiwiSaver and I guess retirement savings, we actually did projections of our own accounts, if you remember, to see what they're going to get to at like age 60 and 65. And the thing that I was so stoked about was if you combine Luke's account and my account in Australia and basically just let it grow between now and us turning 65, even without contributing to it, we basically have enough money to retire on that. Like, we don't have to do anything. And I know that people will be like, oh, shut up, Kat, but because I wasn't given the option to use that for my house, and yes, I do sometimes stress about paying my mortgage now that interest rates are higher, at least I'm like, I don't have to worry about being poor at 65, or I don't have to worry about, you know,
reverse mortgaging or whatever.
or just having like, you know, getting to 50 and as many people do, and then being like, oh my God, now is the time when I need to think about retirement. And yes, I recognize that that's a privileged place to be in, but also I didn't have the option. You know, when the choice is made for you, like maybe that's a good thing. The bad thing here, in my view, is that the choice is not made for you, and if anything, everyone's encouraged to take their retirement savings out to buy a house.
Yeah. I just sit here and think, well, why do we even own homes? Because I mean, another example
I was also flashing forward to me as like a grandma in this beautiful house with no money, just like crying. Like, I can't do anything, but I live in this beautiful home. It's very dramatic, but you know what I mean.
Oh my God. So Ollie's, his grandma or aunt or someone like that, she was Dutch and lived in this beautiful home in the middle of Amsterdam, and it was like your classic picturesque, you know, thing. She rented it, and like her whole life, when she passed away, she didn't have, you know, a physical asset to her name, but she loved the fact that she was able to stay in the city, and it's close to like healthcare and all those kinds of things. So yeah, why do we need to own homes?
Well, you don't, if you don't want to.
Yeah, go think about it.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Not kidding.
Exactly.
Okay. What else? Why else would someone not use their KiwiSaver for a first home?
I think it's probably because, they might go down the path of rent vesting. So I guess the other thing is, you know, you can only use your KiwiSaver for a first home, which is challenging because if they said you could use your KiwiSaver for any home, then perhaps people would be making some slightly better choices because they would have the flexibility to buy investment properties. When you go down the path of buying a home, you have things like, oh my God, is my cat gonna like this garden? Like, can I live in this bathroom? You know, can I walk to work? Where's my coffee shop? Like, just stupid shit. I'm sorry, but we are who we are, and we have the tiniest bit of emotion come in, and we don't necessarily make the best financial choice. And that, I think, probably also sums up why I'm like, your house is not an investment asset, because it's not being decided on its investment merits, it's being decided on its lifestyle merits.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, so, you know, if you were able to take the money out of KiwiSaver to invest in any property, potentially it would be a different conversation we'd be having. So I guess my point is, if you go down the path of, you know, wanting to own property as an asset class but not necessarily as a home, there are ways you can do that, and then you can also keep your KiwiSaver for retirement. Yeah, so, you know, we've talked before on the show about rent vesting, so, you know, renting where you need to be able to live your life, whether that be close to work or family, and then investing money towards, you know, an investment account, a business, an investment property to actually grow your wealth.
Yeah, I love that.
Love that as an option still.
I'm still stuck on the cat in the garden.
Honestly though, but like, I'm sorry, find me a person that has like gone through the first home ownership buying process and not been overcome by like stupid emotional decisions.
No,
you know,
completely. Yeah, and it's like, I must have a lawn because I like grass, or whatever.
Yeah, or like, I have to have this number of bedrooms, or we could not possibly live like 3 more streets over because of this, and you know, that's why it's or you get so attached to something that then you bid, you know, $50,000 over your budget or whatever it might be. So it just,
that's a good point,
complications.
Yes, not straightforward.
Yep.
Something else I will add is that in the same way that you obviously will have decisions when it comes to buying a home, by kind of keeping you your money in one KiwiSaver fund, if you, let's say you have that timeline that moves from being like 10 years to your first home purchase versus like 50, if you're starting from 18 to get to 65 or 45 years, whatever, then you don't have the decision making that needs to be made around, okay, well, as I move closer to that goal, do I need to change funds? And then do I need to change back or whatever? It's very set and forget and hands off. So you don't need to over engage as long as, you know, caveat is make sure you're checking in on your KiwiSaver provider and fund and things like that to make sure you're getting the best bang for buck or value rather, but there are other decisions that are taken out of the mix when you are focused on that one end goal.
Absolutely. I would also argue that you have to contribute less potentially over your lifetime than you do if you are, you know, contributing a certain amount, then taking it out and starting again. So for people that are on, you know, regular salaries and those types of things and potentially have that pressure that like I don't feel like it's possible for me to do 10%, then you know, being able to keep your KiwiSaver for as long as possible on a lower contribution number actually makes sense.
Love that. That's a really good point actually.
So
good.
So I guess from two people that are like, we're not going to use our KiwiSavers. I mean, I would be keen to hear from people because I do appreciate that this may just seem really unrealistic to some people, particularly when you're looking at the property market. But I guess, you know, let's also have a little bit of foresight and think about how we actually want our futures to play out, and is maybe not having a first home for an extra 5-10 years a good trade-off when you think about having a more secure future for 40 years or, you know, 30 years, because also you don't retire at 65 and then pass away a year later. You've still got quite a lot of living to do. You know, and that's why I think that, if we can just temper how much we need to do soon, it'll be better for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be in a position where you have to work, right? When you want to take the time off to spend with family and things like that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Love it.
Thanks for tuning in, team. Really love chatting about these controversial topics.
Stirring
if
the
you've
pot
got
a
a
little
different
bit.
view, feel free to come and chat. I will definitely
debate you.
have a good debate. But also keen to hear about or hear from anyone that maybe hasn't used their KiwiSaver for a first home and, you know, how they got to where they are. Love to have you on a Money Moments episode because I think it helps hearing stories of people that have actually done it but in a slightly different way.
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
Definitely. Send your questions in.
Love it.
Otherwise, we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.